What's up, T-Tam fam? Eric here for a special episode. I've really, I thought of this the other day, and it's something that I really wanted to outline and kind of bring to light on my relationship, the one that I just got out of after almost 2 years. And basically, it comes down to this: it's loving someone who's bipolar and has fearful avoidant attachment, and what it taught me. The highs, the lows, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything kind of in between. I want to preface by saying, like, this isn't about blame. Um, I don't blame her. I'm not forcing anything. I'm not saying anything that is, quote unquote, um, out of pocket. Like I'm just being truthful, full with myself and, what I've learned throughout this whole process. And I hope that somebody going through this themselves can relate because at the end of the day, um, you can fight for everything, but when it becomes an unwinnable battle, no matter how perfect you feel that you are, it's gonna be, and that's really what this relationship was. um, for this time. And it's very eye opening, so buckle up. So I want to start this off by saying she was the most emotionally intensive, emotionally intense, and emotionally inconsistent person I've ever loved. And I say loved because I truly loved her. Um, it was a feeling like no other I hadn't had in any previous relationships at all. Maybe because I was too dumb, young, not thinking about that, having my own walls up and having this, but where I gave this everything um, from the start. That's why this whole relationship was extremely rewarding, but it was also extremely trying in the same capacity. But the beauty of this relationship is, when you find somebody that, wants to, that hears you, that sees you, that listens, that cares, that's different. Men don't, most men, at least, my age, Gen X, I can't say that they get it. Like a lot of stuff stems from, childhood. And I didn't get any of that from my childhood. I didn't get any of that in my early adulthood either. I got it within this relationship. So it was a breath of fresh air and it made me walk on cloud nine. Um, but with that comes the pain. And I'll get more into that um, later on in this video, simply because it's important and it's something that you know we tend to lose ourselves in relationships, and we tend to kind of not question everything, um, but it's something to be mindful of. Um, so basically starting from the beginning, like I had known her 20 years ago. I was actually friends with her sisters. I knew of them. They were part of a similar crew that we used to party together and have fun. But that was it. Like I knew her as her little sister, and that was all. Nothing physical went on. We just knew of each other, and until um, we happened to come across each other one day um, in October of 2023. I happened to take my daughter to Sky Zone, and we were walking the mall, and because the mall was dead, anyways. But I worked in that mall for years, and I was just showing my daughter and just telling her stuff about it, and lo and behold, she walks out of a store. She happens to look left, and she waves. And to be honest, at first I was like, "Who is that?" I have no idea who that is. And then as we got closer, I realized who it was, and she had her daughter with her. And, we kind of had a quick conversation, and then we kept it moving. From there, it blossomed. Reached out, started, texted, DMing each other through Facebook. We weren't Facebook friends, So we became friends on Facebook, and from there it just took off. Really started to, blossom into something big, because at that time there was no BS between either one of us. Like, I was being 100% open and honest, from the start, because one, I owed it to myself to be open and honest, so I held nothing back. And from there, we started our unconventional way of dating, which was, where she has kids, single mom, you know, entrepreneur. So, but then again, for support to watch the kids, there wasn't many around, and so what we would do is we would, try and meet up, 15 minutes here, 30 minutes here, an hour here. An hour was, woof, that was a long time, you know what I mean? But it was awesome because we started at a slow pace, and we bonded fast. We got really deep, and our conversation was just nonstop. Like, we were just talking about anything and everything. Our feelings. What our wants and needs are. I get to see her be. She got to see me be vulnerable. I get to see her vulnerability, and it was different. We had that connection because of our unconventional approach. To this relationship, and it worked. Never would I have thought in a million years that, going this route where having multiple meetups rather than like, hey, I'm going to take you out we're going to go out to dinner, and then we're going to do something on a Friday or Saturday night, for like 4 or 5, 6 hours, whatever. That wasn't in the cards, simply because of, her work schedule, plus the ability to watch her kids. And so I didn't think it was going to work. I questioned it in the beginning, but I found that I learned more because we had those intimate times, and we really capitalized on that time. If we had 5 minutes, it was 5 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, we made the most of that time, and our chemistry right off the rip was, to me, it was really kind of instantaneous. It really did kind of feel like a movie, at one point, and I was like, is this for real? And I would ask her that, and she'd say yes, like, so it wasn't the fact that I was taking something and twisting it around. It was hearing it from her directly, and in that, became the illusion of what could be. She made me feel like I mattered in a way that I hadn't felt ever. And for me, I didn't think I needed that, but in the same token, I did, because I've said in previous videos, I grew up in the fuck your feelings type of genre, and or time period, I should say. And to be able to get that out and express it, and then have her listen. Like, the one thing that I absolutely loved was, like, when we would talk, like, and I would look into her eyes, like, and she was focused on me, and actually listening to what I was saying. Like, to have that was different. It was a welcomed addition, because I'm like, finally, I have somebody who I can confide in, somebody who understands, somebody who's gonna listen intently and not judge. And I didn't judge her, like, that's the other thing, is I was, doing what I do, which is I listen, and that's something that she appreciated, But as I've kind of dove into the bipolar aspect, and later on will be the fearful avoidant aspect, is that she she was wanting everything that I had at that point in time, and I wanted that too. But come to find out, it was something that she craved, and desperately needed, and at that time she wanted it. And so that's why everything was glorious, like absolutely glorious. Like, you know, and I will say she was the one that said I love you first, and that made me feel good because like I had felt it early on, but I wasn't going to jinx myself because I didn't want to say something and expose myself at that point in time for rejection because everything had been going so well, and I'm like, do I say it? Do I not say it? And you know, when when she had said it, I was like, hey, this is something serious. But you know, as I find out, and trauma bonds, um, you know, with her, she has a deep feeling for closeness, and she did. She absolutely did. I mean, we were intertwined, you know, very, um, you know, very physical with each other and all of that, and it was great. Honestly, it was great um, because the beginning felt like a movie. Not gonna lie. I mean, it really truly did, and it just kept on going. Just kept on going. And then, you know, as we would talk, everything, you know, I was taking, you know, hey, my word for yours. Like that was the beauty thing. It was black and white. There was no gray area. And for me personally, I appreciated that because, you know, I'm the type of person that doesn't pick up on cues, and I was upfront with that. I said, listen, um, if you want something, you're gonna have to tell me, right? Don't subtly mention that. But unfortunately, you know, as I get in later on into that, that's what ultimately turned into down the line. So, you know, this next part here is kind of, you know, as the relationship has progressed, is you know, I was never looking for perfection. I didn't ask for perfection because I'm not perfect, right? I'm a guy, but what I had learned, um, you know, after the fact is that when you have somebody that you're dealing with, a partner that has a history of trauma, now whether it be verbal or physical, doesn't matter, you are likely to trigger them. And there were certain things that I happened to do that triggered feelings, and having her react in a way that I thought was, believe me, it was, how can I put this? It was like I understood it from her side, right? And I know why she got upset. And but then again, at that point in time, I didn't know that I was being quote unquote compared to past relationships. Um, and that really was, you know, kind of it. And then when I would go for resolution, which we talked about it, I said, hey, listen, you know, are we good? And she would say yes. Come to find out, she wasn't good. She didn't resolve it. And basically what happened is that it festered inside of her. And she could not let it go, which started the narrative portion that was created. And that was tough because what that did is, you know, she's an overthinker anyways, you know, analyzes, you know, everything a million times over, has all the answers for all the questions and all of that. But you know, when it comes to somebody creating a story in their head against what they happened to see, or what they thought they saw, or what they thought they heard, you can't win that battle. And then comes emotional shutdowns, where we would then be on a break. And that was one of the biggest things where I was being respectful. I'm not a fan of breaks, I never have been, but for this, I was just like, if, you know, because she said, she's like, I need space at times. Okay. I would give her space, you know, because I'm respecting what she would ask me of. But in the same time, you know, early on, I didn't know how to deal with that. And that was very tough because space means disconnection for me. And I can say that with truth and honesty. Um, And the thing of not knowing, right, is you're supposed to be my girlfriend, but you can't talk to me about it. Like, and then when we would we would go back and forth, um, and we would try, like, I would over explain, she would give her side of it, I would see her side of it, I would apologize, I would take accountability, and it just wasn't enough. So we had multiple breaks, and then the distance, with the emotional shutdowns comes the distance. You go from seeing somebody almost every single day to not seeing them for a few days, or not seeing them for a week, or not seeing them for 6 weeks, right? And that's kind of how this progressed through, and it just became, everything was kind of flipped on me. Is I was the one that was having the problems. Um, and I'll get more into that, but ultimately it was her projecting onto me what her insecurities were. And I now understand that I don't blame her. You know what I mean? Like, this is the thing is, everything happens for a reason, right? And when I started seeing these patterns of, we would go for this period, then have to do a reset, then go for that, do a reset, go for that, do a reset. Like, that was something where I was just like, it went from absolutely magical to me going like, what the hell is going on? Like, I had no fucking idea. And I am literally scouring the internet for information, watching videos, podcasts, pulling up articles, learning about all of this. And and the biggest thing, happened to be is she wanted follow through, she wanted presence, she wanted consistency, she wanted accountability, but she could not provide that for herself. To me, in this relationship. And I did everything that I could to pull the weight off of her, because that's what naturally I do. Like, I'm a fixer by nature. But I realized I couldn't fix her. She's the only one that can fix her. So to kind of break down a fearful avoidant cycle, it kind of goes like this. Like, they want closeness. They get scared because when it becomes real, they pull away to self-protect. They feel guilt and shame. Then, once distance is applied, they reach back out and then repeat the cycle. Now, don't jump all over me here. Like, that's kind of a short version of what it is to be a fearful avoidant. And now we get into kind of the bipolar aspect of it, which, I've heard of it, but I've never done my research, and that was, that would be like depression phase mimics rejection, right? And then low energy looks like disinterest. Emotional flatness feels personal, but it's not about you, right? And basically it's dysregulation of, dysregulation in the thing. So you combine the two, and it created such a confusion for me. Like, I couldn't tell the difference between when she needed space and when she was shutting me out, because it would go back and forth. Like, I would, like, she would need space, okay, and then I would try to, reach out to her and say, hey, listen, like, what's going on? Because I'm doing my work on the back end as well, because I want this to work. Like, here, I'm hell-bent. Like, she's my girlfriend. I am going to try. And, put, both barrels, both feet. I'm jumping straight into this. I'm trying to find a way to navigate this relationship. And everywhere I turned, it was wall. And became difficult. you know, and the biggest thing um, is that really when it comes to fearful avoidant or somebody with a mental health illness like bipolar, it's their nervous system really that needs to be rewired, and it takes a significant amount of time and effort by them, not by you, by them, by putting in the time, seeing a licensed therapist, going in, doing some somatic therapy. I actually just bought a book. I'm going to be reading that for myself just to get um, some more information about this. But you know, like the work has to be done on their end because this is something that has come about that they learned at a very young age, which through their childhood, through teens, early adulthood, like they learned all of these quote unquote coping mechanisms, and um, and they bring it into their relationship. And when you have a cycle like that, it's something that you don't one day wake up and say, I'm healed. Let's go. No, like um, you just keep repeating the cycle, whether it's with the same partner or somebody new, right? So now I'm going to talk about the emotional whiplash that I was kind of going through. Um, I went from, wanting to tell her absolutely everything to walking on eggshells because I didn't know what was going to light the fuse, truthfully. Again, I mentioned earlier is I over-explained because I thought that if I kept pushing the issue that she would eventually see what I was saying and understand where I was coming from. Because I tried to fix things that she never asked me to fix. And, I realized that, okay, well, I can't fix her. And I'm not going to fix her. I started, this was after the fact, understanding her moods and how she would react in certain things more so than my own because I was attuned to that because, again, I didn't want to light the fuse to set her off. So this is where I kind of lost myself in the relationship that, I became hyper aware of everything. Okay, so we're going to do X, we're not going to do Y, we're going to do Z, and try and be a few steps ahead of her. Um, I had to, shrink myself in the sense of like how I talk to her because I really had to think about what I was going to say because again, I didn't want to light the fuse. Um, I doubted myself for I said, really, am I really this? Am I causing this much havoc? Um, And at the time, I thought I was, which is why I would over-explain, which is why I would kind of go in and not be able to give the space that she wanted, because me as a person, that's what I do. Um, and I overfunctioned emotionally, meaning I was trying to carry my emotions along with her emotions. And I thought, you know, that's what you do when one person's down. You pick them back up. You put them on your shoulder. You shoulder the load. But it comes down to this: is I loved her so deeply that I started disappearing because it became all about her. And it's a tough pill to swallow. I can take a lot because I've put myself into situations that I'm not proud of, but I've been able to motor through. But being blamed for things I didn't do, responsible for her emotions. I was, punished for without explanation, or minimal explanation, I should say. Um, you know, And it really was, kind of like, oh, we're close one day, and then if something had happened, oh, stranger the next. It's just the hot and cold aspect, pushed then pulled. So you kind of have to, understand that. And if you don't know what I'm going through, it's a tough one, because here you are trying to stay firm, both feet on the 10 toes to the ground, and you don't know whether you're coming or going. But I knew I was strong enough to weather it. It was for how long? Um, so I want to kind of go over, like, crisis, quote unquote, crisis moments, and the time, when it came to breaks. And what I happened to notice was breaks always came when something, with that involved my family, or was coming up. First one started in December of 20. Was it? No, it wasn't December of 23. It was December of 24. My daughter's Christmas party, Christmas parade. We were in a little spat like that. Then, this past year was a lot. Like, I had my nephew's graduation party. We were on a break then. We had my cousin had a sorry, a party, a summer party down at their house, and she was supposed to come down then. We were on a break then. My birthday, on a break. Um, that one was tough, because I I really kind of asked myself, is this what my life is going to be? Is that everything that I have set up, and everything that that I'm doing? Like, is this really how I want this relationship? And I did, because I'm a stubborn mule who is in love. And then, obviously, like, we would get back together, you know, and kind of, resume our dating, and things were good. And then, observation mode, that was pretty difficult. Right after my birthday, well, excuse me, um, before my birthday, I should say, we had a break, and this was the long one. This was the 6-week one, and um, for her, nothing felt safe. She didn't feel ready. She didn't know what she was doing. Honestly, I don't know, how she was processing it. I mean, by herself, I assume. Um, but, like, I had no clue. And then we would reconcile, but then it was, this is really where the eggshells kind of came into play, because she was in observation mode, and here I am, you know, trying to, going along with everything, and not really understanding the weight at that point. Um, and that's when I kind of slowly started to see her, pulling away. And sure enough, it, ended up happening. Um, so, um, yeah, my birthday was really where I kind of, you know, thought to myself, is, I'm consumed. She consumes everything. And I knew that was a problem. And I didn't know how to fix it. For myself, anyway. But this is where, these past 4 weeks have been educational. Simply because I had to understand why for myself. And the way that I kind of look at education is, it's a good way to enlighten yourself, and to be able to get good factual, excuse me, information about what your partner is going through. Because if you don't know and they can't tell you, then how do you find out? So this is where, I learned about, the bipolar reality, the mood swings. They're not choices. Yes, she was on medication for it, but, medication works so much, right? Depression, they turn inward. They're not going to sit there and be like, oh, I'm depressed, I want to talk about it. No, they're going to take in and they're going to keep it to the inside. The emotional bandwidth, what they were, what could they take at that point in time? That changes drastically. And then, love is present even when expression is not. So it's like, okay, how do I see that? How can I get that? Because like, do I assume? So, learning about all of that was good. Now we get into the fearful avoidant reality, which is a desire for connection, but also a fear of connection. And it's, a lot of things, it's about survival mode, and that's what her nervous system is wired for, is survival mode, because it's trauma based. It's self-protection. She was taught from a very early age that she had to be independent, that she couldn't rely on anybody, or if she tried to rely on somebody, they burned her. And so with her, it was, that she was hyper vigilant on that. She was, that was really her way of getting through the day, which made her a strong, independent woman, right? But because she believed that, again, when you're in survival mode, you can't fully give yourself to your partner, and that was one thing that I had learned, that I hadn't gotten her fully. It was always pushed off, and I accepted that because here I am thinking, oh, I got plenty of time. You know what I mean? Eventually it'll come out, right? Wrong. And how distance, is rooted in fear, not rejection. They need the space to process. And that was something that I didn't understand, but learned and educated myself. So I knew if that came down, okay, fine, take your space, enjoy it. So these are all like coming into the lessons that I learned. You can't be somebody's emotional regulator, right? They have to be able to regulate their own emotions, and if they can't regulate their own emotions, you're kind of doomed from the start. You can support them, which a good partner does, but you cannot regulate their emotions. It's not your job, it's not your responsibility. If they ask for it, run. Simple as that. And that was a really big lesson for me. Was I tried to regulate both of us and couldn't do it, right? Love shouldn't require you to shrink. What's that mean? And that, you shouldn't have to, dumb yourself down to a level. Is they should accept you for who you are, the good, the bad, the ugly, right? And I did that from the very beginning. Now, mind you, I knew that, coming into this, that there were going to be things that had been dealt with previously, trauma experiences and all of that. I just didn't know how deep it went. And, had I known about it, I would have approached it differently for sure. But I didn't. So, kind of get sidetracked there. But yeah, like when it comes to love, it's for who you are, not who they think you are or the potential that you have to be. It's for who you are, and stand firm on that. Predictability matters more than passion, right? Consistency is greater than intensity. Peace is greater than potential, and safety is better than chemistry. So when you look at it like that, is that, being consistent, and this isn't just in relationships, this is kind of in your everyday life, like going to the gym, going to church, hanging out with your friends, hanging out with your family, being consistent in that sort of aspect, hanging out with your, doing what you want to do. You want to go play cards, you want to go play ball, you want to hit the gym, you want to go play football, like anything. Just be consistent with it, because that matters. That matters to you. It wires you different. And then peace. You have to find, ultimately, like, your partner has to, you have to be at peace with your partner, and they have to be at peace with you. You can't be like, oh, well, one day when we were sitting on the couch, it was just awesome because it was so peaceful. No, that's not it. So, and ultimately, a person has to feel safe, both physically and emotionally. And if they don't, it doesn't matter how good the chemistry is, it ain't gonna work. Another thing is that I've learned is you deserve to feel wanted and secure, right? So, not one or the other, both, because you can't sometimes be loved. You can't sometimes be conditionally valued. You have to understand that you need to have that want and security around you within that relationship. If you do not have it, you have to move on, because it's just not going to fit what you're looking for. And then, leaving isn't failing. Staying isn't always loving. And you have to know your worth. Now, this is kind of a loaded question, because knowing your worth can come both logically and emotionally. And the know your worth is more of a logical standpoint than it is with an emotional. If you're speaking from emotions, that's just a kind of a defense mechanism. So you have to understand that even though you may love this person, which I loved her very much, and even though she didn't actually say goodbye. One of her final words to me were, "I don't want this." And then recently, like 10 days ago, I sent kind of like a final email of just laying it out, of things, and we went back and forth, and one of her responses, and then my last words were understood goodbye. Understood goodbye. Because even though I wanted this relationship more than I ever thought of, I was willing, absolutely willing, to go to the ends of the earth. I've realized that no matter what I did, it wasn't going to change the outcome. Because at the end of the day, you can't force anybody to love you. You can't force anybody into a relationship. People make choices, and you have to understand that, and you have to respect that, regardless of how it makes you feel. And she chose to walk away. And seeing that hurt, because I thought, hey, this is it. Like, I had bought the ring. I was getting ready to propose. And that is now gone. And it's funny how in such a snap of a fingers that you go from being madly in love with each other to complete strangers. And that's hard. But it's life. And we move on. And I've grown throughout this entire thing. The one thing I do want to say about this relationship is that she's not the villain. I don't blame her for the things that went down. Believe me, I wish things were different, but they weren't. And I wasn't the hero. I tried to be. Tried every bit to be the hero. Give her something she had never seen before. But it's, it was in God's hands, and God brought us as far as we could within that relationship. And I'm forever grateful for it because it taught me more about myself than I ever thought was possible. I don't regret loving her at all. At all. I mean, she will always have a place in my heart because of what she meant to me. Because I know, put the bipolar and the fearful avoidant aside, is I know our time was real, our connection was real, our conversations were real, our physical intimacy was real. I don't regret one bit of that. I regret abandoning myself while trying to save her. And that's hard because if people know me, they know that I'll give you the shit off my back. I'll do whatever it is to make it right, but, and try and fix that situation. But from what I've learned from this is that you can't. You absolutely cannot. So it's a roller coaster of a ride. It comes out hot and heavy. And I tell you, that first year, that was really unparalleled to any relationship that I'd ever been in. And it'll be tough to top, honestly, because of, just everything. But once I started hitting her triggers and kind of setting things off, and that's when it all went downhill real quick. Really quick. And I'm grateful for this experience. I really am. Like, I have no hate for her. Like, I forgave her. And I will continue to forgive her. Because the other thing I want her to be able to see, I wish she could see the person that I see. And I think that would help. But, until she decides to do the work and kind of get things aligned for herself, and she's just going to keep repeating this cycle with the next person and the next person and the next person. Yeah, but in closing, like, I am in a much better place than I was. I've taken, it's been a lot. Like, again, just finding out, doing research of these certain things that I didn't know about before. And it has really opened my eyes and helped me process, because I am now educated on that, and I understand the reasons behind it. That, don't get me wrong, I don't think anything that was done maliciously. It feels like it at that point in time, because you're like, what the fuck? But I know in the end, nothing was done maliciously. I know, her mind was saying one thing, her body was saying another. But the key to this was her nervous system. Because her nervous system is wired for survival, not connection. And that's, kind of the biggest take that I pulled out of it. And no matter what I did, no matter how I did it, I wasn't going to be able to, fix that. So only she can fix it. And I really hope she does, truthfully, because she deserves that. She really, truly does. Because when I saw her in those moments, it was magical. It really was. And the hardest part about all this is that, I happened to run into her at a local grocery store 2 days ago. Unbeknownst, like, I went to the gym and, I went shopping. I had to get, food for the week and whatnot. And we ran into each other, and I gave her a quick hello, and I kept moving. And I knew at that point, being able to say that confidently and not stop to continue the conversation, because she did have a daughter with her, and I wasn't going to make anything weird or uncomfortable. But in the same token, it was tough. But honestly, like I had said what I said through all of my emails, that we went back and forth with, all of our conversation, and I was able to get my closure that way, because I didn't leave any stone unturned. I let it out and did it respectfully, and I take this relationship as, one for the books. Really, it truly was one for the books, and I'm grateful for it. Now, I appreciate you guys taking your Friday night to watch this. And I hope you guys have a great night and a great upcoming weekend. Check out, I got episode 20 coming on Sunday, The Power of Stillness. It's going to be a good one. See you Sunday morning, 7 a.m. Till then, talk to you later.